Hello friends, family, enemies, and maybe the extraterrestrial race that may be monitoring this planet from the other planet. Anyway, I'm half joking but half serious. Welcome, hello, here it is the country of Georgia, the capital city Tbilisi. Right there across the street is what was the Silk Museum. I wonder if it's operating now. This is not the hand of Tamta, but this is a small Tbilisi cat. Quite certain, I have to be careful of these very dangerous animals here in Mushtari Park. Do you have anything else to say? Hello? Meow. Hello? Hello? I already took photos of you. How the hell did you find me? Did you need something? How was your day? I didn't bring food, man. I've got Borjomi. It's the best mineral water in the world. That's about all I've got. I have a friend in Kutaisi that loves cats. We've met here several times in this city, but, well, be careful of the tigers here in Mushtari Park. So, back over this way is the Dinamo Stadium. There's some fond memories there of seeing Robbie. Is it Robbie Wood? Not Robbie Williams. I'm thinking of Robin Williams. Isn't that something that Robbie's his first name? Anyway, he's a World Guinness Book of Records. World Guinness Book of Records. Or a Guinness Book of Records, so how to say that one? Guinness Book of World Records holder for something like most concert tickets sold or something in terms of entertainment. I heard Robbie's first songs when I was in Kiev, Ukraine, at the it's like actually was owned and Scottish ran, but I think we might have even called it the Irish pub. But in any case, regardless of those little details, it was a very hot expat hangout, and it would all us Americans and British and sometimes Western Europeans or maybe an occasional Australian, that's where we'd go, that's where we'd hang out, and we had just these incredible memories. We had some very good times. I don't know, I just realized that I haven't seen Ken Wilkerson on my Facebook for a while. I should look him up. As I well remember, I believe I spent time with Ken there. And Ken is coming in from maybe Ireland or from somewhere there in Great Britain. But in any case, that was my time in Kiev, 13 months. And so I would hear Robbie there. And the song I remember from this last concert here that was most significant was the one about angels. And the lyrics from either that song or another song, but it was the idea of getting into a relationship and already planning for it to be over, which is a bad expectation. Which is a very important reason why I share Marissa Peer. That's Marisa Peer, P-E-E-R, who is now in London, and she's been studied by the British Society of Surgeons, medical surgeons, and the Society of Psychiatrists, and she has worked with the members of the royal family. She has developed a transformational therapy, rapid transformational therapy technique, and it has to do with your mind. It has to do with the blockages or the false beliefs that we have picked up along the way of life. And how they, you know, in this lyric that I'm remembering by Robbie Williams, I just can't remember if that's his last name or not. I'm thinking of Robin Williams, but his first name is Robbie. I know that. I'm thinking about how that we, you know, when you have these negative expectations, and that's exactly one of the reasons why I took her course, Uncompromised Life. Started in, I think it was February, finished up about March, and so 8 weeks, which is what's intended. But then I come back about a month or so later and did 4 more weeks on the bonus material. And so it's this concept that I look at sometimes. Why am I thinking and expecting? It's this whole thing of expectations, which brings me back to Ideas for Partnership, which is a wonderful, key important writing. And though I've read this and read it over the years, it's good to talk about it, to be reminded, or to revisit these kinds of things, because, you know, sometimes with rapid transformational therapy, she can do, or a person can do, one of those sessions, and problem gone, blockage removed, or issue resolved. And sometimes, you know, like I moved into the Ideas of Partnership because I mentioned the word expectations, which is also a key to anger, according to one FIGU publication, FIGU, out of Switzerland, Hinterschmidt-Ruti, Switzerland, the Silver Star Semjaze Center, the Billy Edward Albert Meyer case, UFO case. And I'm talking about the spiritual teachings and the publications from FIGU. And so we talk about expectations. You know, I just mentioned it because the expectation that I'm reminded of in a song by Robbie Williams, and again, it's disgusting that I don't remember for sure if that's his last name or not, because I keep thinking of Robin Williams, the actor, who made a couple of great movies which were key and instrumental in changing my entire life at that time. I was about 29 or 30 years of age. What Dreams May Come, and Dead Poets Society. Anyway, back to Robbie the singer, who performed over here behind me at Dynamo Stadium. And I have a couple of films from there and some photographs from that wonderful concert, as he's a Guinness Book World Records holder, and like the most Guinness Book of World Records holder and the most like tickets sold or something. Anyway, he's a fantastic entertainer, but I'd never heard much of him out of America. It's only when I came to Kiev I was introduced into a whole other half a world of music that even out of Scotland, or out of London, you know, out of Europe, that I'd never heard much at, or if ever, in the United States, and of course especially from Russia and even Ukraine, and it was a real blessing to have a whole other world of music to find anew, fresh. So expectations, and this idea of anger too. One part of this thing about anger is having expectations, and then your expectations aren't met, and then you're in instant, emotional reaction if your expectations are higher than what you expected. And he explains this, Billy Edward Albert Meyer, in Ideas of Partnership, that is a source for conflict, anger, frustration, breakup, divorces, in marriages, for example, in romantic relationships, because there is such societal ideas that are embraced by people that are so high for perfection, that when those aren't met, when they get further into the relationship, then the relationship stands to, end up in a lot of conflict or disharmony and, failure a lot of times. So this whole idea of expectations, it reminds me of this lyric in the song that I'm thinking about, that he had sang, and it was like the idea that, well, I already expect this to end. But when you're an astrologer like myself, or you've had some development of your psychic abilities, which I've done exceptionally well with, and they're very real, and I've been able to tell exactly between the two using astrology and a well-developed or exercised or skilled intuition or psychic sense. I could tell exactly when things, generally speaking, were going to go down before they went down. I'd say, well, if we're going to get through this one period, then, it's like telling the weather forecast. This week it'll be sunny, everything will be great. Next week, or in this particular 2 or 3 day period, there'd be a risk of a breakup or an argument or something like that. I got very well at being able to do that. It was almost like reading a book. It got to the point where it was like almost tiresome for me, because like, oh, here it goes again. I can read it before it happens. And of course, the ultimate game in that is to be able to do like I did with my mother and brother one time, and I've done this multiple times with family, but I actually was able to tell them when there was a very stressful time coming up, and if they didn't have somebody in place as a backup to what was a family member that was hired in, and they just didn't expect the family member to pull a no-show and an instant quit kind of thing. That's exactly what happened, but it was indeed a very stressful time. And if they had not done that as I had advised them to do, which they paid attention to me after first of all throwing up the Christian phrase of, you know, that's not Christian and we don't believe in that kind of thing. It's like, look, actually it's in the Bible. It's very strongly in the Bible, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's so many references to it in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And if you go to the Vatican, they've got the zodiac on the ceiling there. In art in one of the places in the Vatican tour, and I spent 5 hours on the last tour of 2 tours I've taken of the Vatican. Not only that, out of Rome, the Catholic Church, but I've also been in the old 2nd century cathedral here, and there is Christ in a 16th century fresco or painting on the wall. Let's call it wall mural, but painting or fresco is the proper term here. And it is 16th century, maybe even earlier, but at least as old as 16th century, and it is Christ with the zodiac, the signs of the zodiac around him. In fact, there's a whole analogy to the Western dating and timing of the Christmas story exactly there in the New Testament. I will stop with all this. The point is that they were able to make that small move, and it was intended to help, and it did, because they had somebody ready to go step in, train, and they stepped in. And it was at a very stressful time where my mom was waiting on a particular medical test to come back that would have been like, you know, it was stress enough to even have an answer like that to wait on. And my brother had some stuff going on with some other issues. So they didn't have to worry about working all the time, overtime, extra shifts. They didn't have to worry about that. It reduced the stress. So you can actually change your own future. With the type of astrology that I do and the type of intuition that I've developed, you can actually change your future. My family's done it. Unfortunately, I've got another family member that wants to hear nothing about it, wants to know nothing about it, and he's particularly gets angry if he doesn't want to tell if, like, I know when he's going to die, for example. Now, the thing is that that's a pretty profound thing that I just said, because why would your family member be so adamant, upset, and afraid, and very strong in saying, I don't want to know, don't tell me, that kind of thing? Because I've done it enough times with them and those around me that, in fact, my friend's daughter's boyfriends here at the time, this is back in 2010, 2011, he referred to himself as death is near, because that was kind of, that's how I was known. When I walked into my brother's house at a party, people are drinking beer, listening to music, playing cards, you know, using the flip video, making jokes and funny little videos, you know, stuff like this. When I came to the living room, Casper, the guy I talk about in one of my fight stories, he looked at me and called me Dr. Death. And we both kind of laughed at each other. I mean, laughed about that, not at each other. But it was a kind of a nervous laugh, because I got to thinking, you know what, he's right, and what a way to talk about that. Anyway, we had another family member, extended family member, that we had gotten together, and I had forecast on video in advance that there would be a death near and a funeral, but I didn't know exactly who it would be. And in fact, there was one family member that was talking pretty suicidal and was with a pretty serious health problem. And because of my foreknowledge and my ability to, what I believe to be, to change the future, there was a death, and it was right in front of me that the stroke happened to someone else, 93 years old person. And I was kind of like there working on some marketing stuff on the computer at family's business, and that person stroked out at the table. There were about 8 or 12 people sitting there that are elderly, and of course that is incredibly difficult situation to deal with. It about a 24, 25-year-old farm girl, staff member there, and she was a little bit jittery But she handled it well. But I was there, I was completely calm and able to back them up, including family, including helping even to get her out into the vehicle and to handle everything until you know, the other family members, business people arrived, and then the medical. Because I knew it. I published it in advance on YouTube that it was going to happen. Their death would be around me. I told my father, I told my mother, and we had the other family member, extended family member, committed, which I believed, and it wasn't me, it was me talking to some other family members outside of my mother, father, brother. This is extended family. And so I warned them, and they had him committed, and I believe because of that, because the commitment changed his entire behavior and his level of health, because of that, he was alive for another 2 years before he passed on. But he was very critically, medically ill in any case. But I believe he wouldn't have lasted that long. And so I believe that we got another 2 years of you know, seeing him on holidays, or, you know, I have him in one of my films with my father and brother. So that's how I operate. I operate in such a way. There was a demonic tarot I picked up at Barnes & Noble in Columbia. And I thought, okay, I knew how to do tarot. I knew how to do readings. I could read off of a tree if I wanted. I could read off of a glass. I could scry, as they call it. I could reflect. Okay, I could intuit. I could get intuition off of like a girl from Persia, from Iran, came to a friend's hotel here. And she did the coffee grounds reading for us. And so you can use any surface of contemplation. And in astrology, you can use an astrology chart. You can use a calendar. You can use a transit. You can use a progression. Although it's a hell of a lot more helpful, because with any good astrology reading, if you have an indication in terms of research or questioning the person coming to you for your intuition or your astrology, for example, if they say they're in the chicken business, they raise chickens and they produce chicken meat to sell to stores or whatever, to markets or to restaurants, and then you see some bad astrology coming up, and if it's a financial nature, you can tell them to be on guard about their business or about, you know, their personal finances or whatever. And if it's Magi astrology, you could use Ceres, and if Ceres afflicted, you could definitely point out that it's a business issue if it's aspected in a negative sense from a you know, a planet. If it's in a, you know, a clash angle, it would be problematic for their business. So anyway, back to expectations. To be able to see the negative situations and change that around is very important. But I've been so defensive that other people have had to step up and say, look, you know, you've got to look at the whole picture. Number one, this is what the Magi Society and the Magi Society's astrologers will teach. You've got to look at the whole chart. You got to look at the whole picture. I get so defensive and so focused on being a defense-minded, strategist-minded, you know, heavy Pallas, my Pallas Athene, but we call it Pallas and Magi astrology, and it has very specific meanings based on the Magi Society's research. I get so strategic and in terms of defensive that I think too much on that sometimes, instead of being more looking at the whole chart, looking at the whole picture, looking at the off balance of the thing. And that's something that, you know, we can all learn from in our life. We never get all the knowledge, all the experience, and all the wisdom. That's why we have several, you know, millions of lives. Reincarnations is the word I was looking for, because as creation evolves through us, the fragment of the creation, the creational, is within us, the human spirit, the human being. And so through many lives, like many facets on the beautiful diamond or a jewel, the radiance of the experience, the wisdom, comes forth. Knowledge and experience. And that's one reason we're here, is to make mistakes. So if you're making mistakes, good for you, because you're living. And you're dying, aren't we all? Sooner or later. So with this song and this stadium behind me, Dynamo Stadium, and having filmed and published a couple of films of a couple of songs from that concert, I'm just reminded about the lyrics in one of those songs about, like, I met somebody, or I'm in a relationship and I'm already leaving them before I've met them. And that's a bad expectation. If you have adopted this type of thing, whether you're an astrologer like myself, or have a psychic sense, or just it's just not a good expectation. And if you catch yourself thinking that, or having that limited or limiting or self-sabotaging belief, you have to remove that. And you know, certainly if you're an expat and you're living that lifestyle as I have for 15 years, you know, whenever you get on an airplane, it may be the last time. This is the dirty secret, I call it, of international travel. It might be the last time you ever see someone. There's a million things that could happen, and this time it's COVID-19 and the global pandemic and the changing rules on travel and restrictions and where and when you can't go and so on. Like, I think it's Melbourne, Australia, just went under like millions of people, or at least that city for sure. They went under the heaviest lockdown, heavier than what was here. Here was pretty heavy. So, you know, things can change quite quickly, and there's millions of Australians right now that can understand exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the current situation. So expectations can cause anger. Expectations, if they're too high, okay, if they're too much, they can cause anger. They can be a source of anger, and that's coming from an FIGU, a FIGU publication, something that they've published. And I can't remember if it was in a contact note or a special bulletin or just a bulletin or just one of their other publications out of FIGU in Switzerland at Hitterschmidt-Ruti or the Silver Star Semjaze Center. But expectations, the ideas of partnership, Billy Edward Albert Meyer, or Billy Meyer, ideas of partnership. That particular article, that particular contact note, that part of it talks about this. But there's another specific writing that talks about expectations and anger, and it being a trigger to anger, frustration, disharmony, and eventual breakups or breakdowns of not only partnerships but even marriages. So, you know, and it reminds me of the Robin Williams, the movie What Dreams May Come, because his son's got some kind of challenges with learning, and he's not performing and doing well enough in school. And Robin, who is in the movie the character of a medical specialist, is really getting on his son and expecting him to do more. And he says, I can't be like you. I'm not you. That's how he responds. It's in the rain, it's under a tree or something like this, and he goes, I'm not you. So what a realization, right? So there's so many lessons in these things, but the expectations and the Robbie Williams and that lyric, that reminds me of all that, and how it fits into Marissa Peer's work, who is in London now. She was in LA before that. Now she, in the last live stream I saw through Mind Valley. Mind Valley is a wonderful, wonderful company, and they have the products or services there. It's just mind-blowing. It's really fantastic. They were going to have something over in Armenia. I don't know if they're still, or if they already did, with Armenia, but in fact I read that the founder of Mind Valley had just moved into Estonia, and I bet you that that's because of their world-class secure internet and e-residency. It's one of the best and easiest in the world, and I don't know that for sure, but I just saw something today on Facebook about Mind Valley and about how he used the example of Jeffrey Allen's energy work techniques, and he had went and looked through 21 apartments, and finally he did one of those techniques of Jeffrey Allen's, and he went to the 22nd one, and that was it. He shifted his energy with Jeffrey Allen's one of Jeffrey Allen's energy techniques. So now the cat is taking a bath. You know, expectations can be normal and healthy, I believe, but here is the other side of it, as taught from the source that I mentioned, or the article that I mentioned, and to the point to where it can even cause a lot of anger. Because the way we are seeing things and looking at things makes all the difference in the world sometimes, and that's what's so beautiful about Marissa Peer's Rapid Transformational Therapy. She has a lot of free material on YouTube, and Mind Valley has a master class with her, and so very happy that I went through her Uncompromised Life program. I'm seeing now that she's got one on prosperity and abundance, or how you're looking at those issues. Or Ken Honda's got an interesting course. That's a whole other different masterclass through Mind Valley. So what we're thinking, what we're expecting, it's very careful evaluation, the self-talk that we're engaged in, the point of view that we have and why we have it. Is it really where we want to be with that, or is it something that we have, that's been framed in from the culture, the society, the church, the government, the college, the book, the magazine, the movie we just watched, or a partner that we're closest to, whether it's a roommate or in a relationship, partnership, or family. It's very much the question of, is that who we really are, and is that what we're really thinking, or is that something that we're looking through the frames of that is those around us and not ourselves, not our own independent desire, thinking, need, and limitations, self-imposed or not. What's going on with it? So these are important contemplations, and if you study magic and Hermeticism, this is, in terms of Franz Bardon's, this is one of the first teachings you'll get, is the Hermetic mirror, the inner mirror of contemplation. In fact, not only him, but also Donald Michael Craig. It's an inner work. What do you really want? Because if you start with magic, one of the first questions that comes up is okay, what is it that you really want? If you could have anything and everything, and this is a part of one of Marissa Peer's recent blog posts, I believe, or articles about finding your passion or your like your true calling, is like, well, if you had everything, what would you do? If you were already, let's say, a billionaire, for example, what would you do? What would you pursue if money was not an issue? And so it's kind of the similar thing with magic. When you first pick up a book on magic and you're very serious about pursuing it, like I did my black belt in Taekwondo, or the aerobics that my dad taught for many years. I'd go there at least 3 times a week for, I don't know how many years it was, but he taught for 21 years, 17 as the chief aerobic instructor at the YMCA, Salt Fork YMCA. And I pursued those things with great discipline, great persistence, great tenacity, and regularly. It was a part of our life. And here in a moment I'll have to restart this because we're almost at 30 minutes here in another minute or two. So, what you would do if you had everything, or if you had the ability to wave a magic wand or do a magical ritual or ask an angel, let's say, or command one, like I did when I was about 33 years old, show me the world. Show me the world. And I'm standing about 150 meters from the local airport with predominantly private jets flying in and out of there for the meatpacking plants, or the CEOs that can afford private jets. And I'm saying that in a magic type of situation. And here it is 15 years later, and I've traveled through 30 countries, more or less, feet on the ground. So as I used to say on Facebook, be very careful as a young magician what you command, what you task, what you order, what you set forth to manifest. Because unless you're ready for it, you may or may not be as ready for it as you think you are. Was I ready? Yeah, I was ready. I had enough education and enough education and enough experience, the martial arts training, the experience in that, I can defend myself, and I will always be able to do that because I was not only trained to the level of first degree black belt in Taekwondo, but also Hapkido, and not a Hapkido black belt, but Hapkido was our other martial arts training. Our instructor called it 3-step sparring a lot of times, but we were trained in like what he would call three-step sparring or self-defense, And the idea was that in 3 steps, or 3 moves rather, you wanted to be able to, disarm someone or defend against, like a choke from behind, or, grab, or, being grabbed from the front, all these things in self-defense and Hapkido. And now his son, who I was around for 7 years, because he was often there, those guys were very, very little back then. And I was from age 13 to age 20 and trained, and 3 to 5 days a week. And so there's a huge library that I had carried around the world for years, even here, Panama, of DVD instruction from some of the best Special Forces trainers, Navy SEALs trainers, Sistema, Spetsnaz Sistema trainers, and so on. The Israeli special units, Special Forces trainers, and so on. So I've just seen about all of that, including Chris Clugston's Comrack boss, and others. Jerry Peterson was the teacher, along with 2 other guys, on the SCARS training program, which is U.S. Navy SEALs developed hand-to-hand combat self-defense system that teaches the offensive mindset and so on and so forth. So, I'm just not, and seeing Coe's website years later and his amazing resume, I'm not sure I ever saw that. And it was only within the last several years that I had seen Coe's amazing resume, and then looking at Eric's Black Belt Academy there, Coe's Black Belt Academy or Black Belt Academy there in Olathe or Kansas City or Independence or wherever. And they're doing, the Taekwondo and Hapkido instruction ongoing, and it's just an incredible, great fortune that I was able to train with that. And I'm very thankful to my mother, my father, and my brother. My brother and I were going most often. My dad came when he could. He was also a lot of the times there, and some years he was on the road doing a lot of sales work, financial services, mutual funds, term life insurance, and in fact I used to run some of the computer programs, just a data entry operator after school for several years. We'd come home and maybe have 1 to 4 hours of data input for running pages and pages, about a 30-page report of, whole life insurance versus term insurance, and term insurance being cheaper, more affordable, and then investing the difference in mutual funds, and that helped a lot of people retire very securely in a very stable situation versus buying whole life insurance and not investing. And basically that was it. So that's what I would do after school, and then go work out. That's for some years there in Blue Springs, Missouri, when either I or my mother, before I was 15 and a half, 16 years old, would drive my brother and I over to Independence, Missouri for Taekwondo with Grandmaster Master Recon Ko there at Independence. And then later when I was up there, and again I went to Overland Park, Kansas. And so and I wrote about a lot of these fight stories that I've had. I call a couple of them just child's play. In fact, 3 or 4 of them at least child's play, because for me I was a child. I trained with police and U.S. Army, U.S. military, security police, and some real badasses, and I was in the top 5. And for me, that's why, but there could be 10 people come down here right now, and I'm going to tell you right now that I had a fight where I attacked 5 initially. There was 5. And I attacked them brutally, repeatedly. It was an extortion attempt against me. And I took not only the offensive mindset, but I took offensive action, and justifiably so. And I was an absolute legend, even more at that point. And there were 60 witnesses. So that's nothing for me. So I just look at that like, okay, that's nothing. That's why I could walk onto 7 different military bases. Whiteman's Air Force Base, no problem. I wouldn't expect any problem in the world there anyway. But even here, being in a so-called foreign country, right? and going on to military base, and there's some multinational military exercises, or whether it's private entry through someone that had the access and that I was filming on, or a part of the International Society of Alexander Carvelion and so on. You know, it's just like I trained to fight with these people. I sparred with these people. I was in class with these people. I'm not talking about the Georgians. I'm not talking about the Air Force. I'm talking about when I was all throughout my ages 13 to 20, I trained with military and police and security police, and a guy that was just out of the U.S. Army Ranger training, and I broke his nose, Ryan Thurber, who was just discharged, medical discharge, U.S. Army Ranger training. In fact, he was at the parachute training, paratrooper training, and he had a medical discharge because of the sunlight hitting in his eyes. I told this story so many times on film, but I'm just saying, I'm just better trained than, and was out of 500 students, I was in the top 5 for sure, in terms of being able to fight in speed. And I competed in, you know, Nebraska, Omaha, Kansas City, Columbia, St. Louis, or St. Charles. You know, I just don't, I will forget more martial arts than 99.9% of anybody will ever know. Now I know there are that other percent out there that does know, and that may have, that does have more experience than I know that. But going up against somebody that's been trained for so many years in Hapkido all through my youth, and has used it automatically, it just comes like automatically. In fact, I found myself here. A couple of guys walked up on me behind me, and I thought it was too close. But the thing is here, and if you're over in Europe, or even this far into, let's say, Eurasia, there is a difference in space. And my friend told me about that before I left to travel, who had spent some years in Germany and Japan and over in Europe. And he told me about that. He goes, look, you're going to find people who are going to come close to you, and you're not used to that because you're from the Midwest. And he goes, you just have to accept that. They don't mean anything. They're not even thinking anything. Because, you know, if it was over in the Midwest, you'd start to think like, well, what's going on here? And there might be a conflict, or might be something spoken, or, you know, like what's, you know, you're going to sense like something's up. It's not the case over here most of the time. It's a difference in space, proximity. There's a lot more mass transit, public transit used. You know, trains, buses, trolleys, and air trams even, and so on. So there's a lot of difference in spacing. But you know, I found myself just wanting to put my foot out in front of somebody coming up on me close like that, thinking that they're you know, they're gonna try to mug me or rob me or something. And I just found myself thinking about Hapkido. And because at first I'm like, why would I think about, I could just, in fact, I almost did. One guy, I could just kind of let him pass because he was too close, and so I just kind of moved in such a way that, you know, to back him off of me. And if I would have put my foot out and then shoved his shoulder, he would have went flying forward head first into the concrete. And I just knew that because I had the Hapkido training, and it was just automatic. It's just like this one fight I talked about where I flipped the girl up in the air and out of the way, safely out of the way, but flat on her back. Just automatically. This guy had attacked me when he opened the door. He punched me in the jaw and was attacking. You know, he was. So I legitimately did self-defense. But the girl stepped in the middle, and I just automatically, she was out of the way, but up in the air. It was a Hapkido move. And so the training from Master Recon Co., Grandmaster Recon Co. is absolutely fantastic there in Kansas City, Missouri. And I'm sure Eric is, I haven't seen Eric as an instructor, but I can't imagine how amazing he is by now, because he was much younger than I when I started. So the training, the discipline, and you know, it was very, very disciplinary training. You did not get out of line in Master Co's class. You maybe find yourself doing in a push-up position on your knuckles over in a corner of the studio, and there basically wasn't going to be much crying about that either. I mean, it's just very much, you know, you might even find a few little knuckle wraps on your head, or be called a pumpkin head. There was no shit taken in Master Co's class. He was an instructor in Taekwondo and Hapkido, or self-defense, hand-to-hand combat for the U.S. military. So there was no shit taken in our classes at all. And I trained with U.S. military that would come over from Leavenworth, Kansas from time to time. Or if they were taking a class like Ryan Thurber, I broke his nose just before he became black belt instructor at Forco. And it was bloody. I mean, it wasn't a soft break, it was a full-on, I broke his nose. So, you know, I've got enough experience against even multiple opponents, and sometimes I didn't even have to harm anybody or even punch back. It was just child's play for me. It's just, that's what we're trained and raised to do. And then years and years of kickboxing aerobics, you know, in my dad's classes, very public, very public. The YMCA, South Fork YMCA is very, very open. There's a walking track around it, even though it was partitioned off from the, you know, the weight training area and, you know, the other areas of the YMCA. People would walk around the track, and there'd be about 30 to 60 students, 15 to 60 students maybe per class. And, you know, I could do the Chinese splits, do the, you know, the other splits. I could put my foot above my head and not even have to hold it. I was, quite frankly, the most flexible, one of the most flexible, if not the most flexible and fastest student there, hands and feet. And what I showed what I could do with a wave master, or let's say a punching bag, but a wave master with elbows, was just followed up. I just found, wasn't followed up, but it happened to be that this last week a Russian Spetsnaz Sistema teacher is an amazing teacher. It's an amazing martial artist, warrior, over in Russia, made a film, and one of the films he published was about how that he used the term in the writing, the subtitle of the film, non-murderous, you know, forbidden murderous elbows. You know, like, you don't want to kill somebody with these, but we know that you can, just with the elbow techniques. And it's not going to matter how big you are. It's not going to matter how much strength you've got, because the elbow is like a baseball bat. It's like a lead pipe. And if you just, you know, it's very similar to kind of like swinging a baseball bat if you're into American baseball. You know, that hip action, that twisting action, everybody's got an elbow. And everybody's got, thus, a lead pipe, so to speak, in terms of self-defense. That's why when I'd see this fantastic model here, Miriam Managadse, who is a kickboxer, and she'd do some training with her, you know, one of the, I presume to be the Georgian instructors here, which those guys, the Georgians, are some of the best wrestlers and judo and martial arts people in Europe right here. So it's not to detract or take away from them in any sense of the form at all. It's just that I don't know if they've got Hapkido here or not, but Hapkido is nothing that cannot compare on every level with the martial arts that they are using here. You know, so that's why when I'd see her, I'd ask, you know, like when she'd post a video or photos of you know, them training, like, well, are you learning, are you using your elbows? Because in a rape situation, you know, you get some big guy or a bodybuilder or a security guy or just a big mafia fuck or just some drunk big guy, you know, where these models may go somewhere in life, they're going to need to know more than punching and kicking. They're going to have to be able to use, or it would be beneficial, they might not have to do shit, but they may want to be able to use, or may find it very handy to use in real life self-defense, all forms of elbows. And that's why I asked if they're training them in that, because I saw that they were not. And they need to be, especially females who are, as models, some of them don't have arms or leg any bigger than these little tree branches I'm looking at over here. But if they learn to use their elbows and open hand palms and things like that too, like Hapkido trains us, and other martial arts, not just Hapkido. But yeah, so that's all I'll say about that for now. I'll get off that topic. So back to the original topic of expectations and what we're limiting ourselves to in terms of what we're believing, what we're telling ourselves. The more independent you can think, the more you can get a realistic, positive, neutral sense of who you are, where you are, and what you really want, the better off you'll be, because you'll find yourself going through like a course like I just did for, you know, 8 weeks, and then the bonus material for 4 weeks during this COVID-19 lockdown over here, you know, and And you come out of it like I have, and I'm still unfolding. I feel like I'm a lotus flower, or a mountain wildflower. That's better explanation. Mountain wildflower blossoming here and unfolding, and I am just very completely different in my inner world. I am, and I'm like, you know what? I earned what I've got. I mean, I did. I earned what I've got, and it's a lot, and it's a hell of a big thank you to my mother, and my father, and my brother. All of them were great family support, and they participated. My God, my mother drove us up there for years to Ko's Academy of Taekwondo, and to Worlds of Fun, where I worked in the summers. I had a wonderful, beautiful, not without its problems. I had some problems. Who doesn't? When they're in their teen years especially, but I had a wonderful youth. I had a fantastic youth. I love Kansas City. And that's why I love going back to the International Relations Council of Kansas City, the IRCKC when I was up there in Missouri last year. I mean, it was a blessing to be able to go to something like that with an international experience that I have. What a blessing. I really felt at home, and it felt really good to be back in Kansas City. Now, I was pretty shy because it's my first couple of times there, and I wanted to observe, and I could have asked questions of the ambassador or even of Paula Dabrowski, I assume. But, I mean, there was a half-hour Q&A session with the longest-term serving U.S. ambassador in U.S. history there. But I chose to just kind of kick back, kind of keep quiet, just do more observing and listening and thinking than, asking a question or something. And I'm glad I did that. So it was a really beautiful thing to come back to Kansas City, especially with the amount of films that I have in one of the most critically important part of the world in terms of geopolitical situation and the military situation, because as the Prime Minister of Armenia had just stated, according to Radio Free Liberty Europe, on an article about the end of the conflict that was happening just this last month there in July for a period of time, once again between Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's a military conflict, and he really thanked Russia above all for really working on the peace process, but also the USA and France, and maybe there was another in there. But, I found that to be very interesting because that backs up what Billy Meyer has said about Russia. And I had made a comment some time ago, not so long ago, about this Adam Kinzinger, and saying that, about his calling Russia being weak or something like that, that something about war. I was making the comment that, I used the MF profane word, and I said nobody wins a war with Russia, and I don't mind if Russia legitimately, honestly were to make war against the United States in the terms of where it would be justified, honestly, to where we have to have war. Okay, then let's do what we got to do. But if it's illegitimate, and it's illegitimate, it's not legitimate, and all that, if it's not real, then no, don't do it, because what's going to happen is that nobody wins that war. That is a war we all lose. We all lose. There's no winner. And so anybody that thinks another way, they're fucked in their head. That's it. Now here I go using the F word, and I just use MF for the hey, I tried. But no, we're all fucked if that war takes place, and it's like, well, we see, quite frankly, too many times where it's not legitimate. Let's face it, let's just be honest. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. So I was happy to see kind of an echo, or let's say, being on the same page kind of situation with the Prime Minister of Armenia in his remarks on that, the military conflict that had just been, resolved for for now, or to some level, or to some degree. At least they stopped the military action between Armenia and Azerbaijan. At least he said what I was saying just before that, which is that, you know, their conflict here could very quickly escalate into a global conflict, and specifically, I said global thermonuclear war. And that's I was really happy to see him say that, because that's exactly or close to that, because I said it. That's exactly what I just said, is exactly how I put it. That's exactly what I said. So to see the president of Armenia, or prime minister of Armenia, say that was really refreshing. But he was very thankful, and most crediting Russia for their help in the peace process there. You know, it was interesting because on the Institute of War and Peace Reporting, I was in one of their webinars, and it was a really good one. I mean, I was kind of surprised, actually. I thought it would be pretty dry and boring, and I wouldn't learn anything new, but the guy that was presenting, I think he was around 55 or so, was in London, and he'd been like a reporter with, I can't remember if it was Reuters or the BBC or some major, you know, like APA or Reuters or BBC level media, that and for more than 25 years, I think. And he was talking about the importance of storytelling, and it was refreshing to hear him admit and acknowledge that, say for example, there's 7 forms of traditional templates, let's say, of storytelling and how they're structured. And in reality, you know, there's not necessarily a right or wrong way. It's mainly just what's effective. So it's like these photographers. They'll pick out one great photo and put it there on Facebook or in their folio or their presentation. One great photo. And I used to put up hundreds off an event. And then I had another friend here tell me, oh, you need to go through, for example, if you go through 300 photos you've taken, maybe pick out 30. And it is the standard advice from the courses I've read online or been through online, that you want to go about 20 or 30 out of, let's say, 300 or 400 photos. You want to pick your 20 or 30 best to present in a story or an album or a portfolio. So, you know, but it's really boils down to whatever is effective, right? You can take those guidelines, and it would depend on the situation. You know, like if you had the Australian forest fires that were so devastating here not so long ago, could we honestly say that only 20 or 30 photos would do it justice? Well, maybe it would depend on the photos. But I think in that circumstance, you could easily take 300 or 400 photos and put into an album, a book, or a story, or even a documentary film. And for some, it would be too much, and for others, it would be well done. So it would depend. You know, it's like this a nano that I filmed and photographed. It was the most amazing experience I've ever had, but especially over here, photographing, you know, beautiful girl. And she was so good at posing that, I mean, it was hard not to capture, you know, I mean, you couldn't break her skill, her looks, her poses. You could not break that down into only 20 or 30 photos. You could not do that. There was too many. It was too good. She was just extremely excellent at so many different poses and positions. I was blown away. And you know, I dated Kate. I was almost married Kate for about 8 months, and she was a photo model. And I had taken at least 4,000 photos of Kate. At least. I had at least that many in the computer. So, and several times, in several places. So the experience of, you know, photographing a model, especially a model with some experience, was nothing new to me. And especially after, at that point, that I had photographed a nano in December of 2019 and January 1st of 2020, this just passed, you know, 8 months ago. You know, I had hundreds of girls on fashion weeks, hundreds. So to come to that type of amazing experience in terms of photographing a nano and seeing her ability to come up with 5 looks and a multitude of poses. It was just incredibly intelligent, creative, great energy. I mean, I was captured. I was blown away by her, and also her. You know, they were on time. She said everything was just. It was mind-blowing for me as a photographer, and that's kind of profound when you consider that. You know, like one of my photo slideshows is off of a top model here, international model, TV journalists, 3.5 years of photos from the fashion shows. And when I say 3.5 years, that would be anywhere from realistically 2 to 4 fashion weeks in a year. But say take that times 3.5, and that's what I have of her. And you know, anyway, it was pretty mind-blowing. So expectations can go the other way. When you don't have those expectations, when you're thinking, okay, this girl, I've never seen her on Fashion Week, although I've seen her do a fashion runway, you know, in a mall, for example, or you know, some other type of an event. I was blown away, but I didn't have those high expectations. It doesn't matter whether I had high expectations with her or not. She was mind-blowing. So about expectations, though, when we have expectations that are too high or too unrealistic or maybe too many, and whether it's a business partnership or a friendship or even in family or a marriage or a romantic relationship, we can find ourselves being triggered to anger, triggered to conflict, unhappiness, disharmony, and failure ultimately, and maybe an end where it could have been something different if we didn't have hammer these expectations. You know, it's like when I go back to the U.S. The U.S. is so safety conscious, so politically correct now, so many expectations. It's the United States of America versus being over here. I mean, quite frankly, it's a hell of a lot more different when you don't have, you know, like all these expectations on safety, political correctness, laws, a multitude of laws, how it's supposed to be, blah, 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 blah. It's quite different in a societal sense too, you know, and there's benefits to having a certain amount of rules, laws, or expectations, but if there are too many, if they're too high, we're going to find ultimately failure and disharmony and maybe things worse than that too. In fact, we can find ourselves at conflict and even war. So that's something to think about, and that's the point of a lot of this, is for us to think and try to think more independently and analyze the inner mirror, our inner mirror, the mirror of contemplation, of self-reflection. And that is the first step and first work of Hermetics or even Kabbalistic magic training, is to assess strengths, weaknesses, and where you really want to be and where you really are. And as independently as and thoughtfully as possible. And that's interesting, isn't it? Many people don't know that. That's some of the first exercises in magic, because if you can have whatever you want to manifest whatever you want, well, then you better seek yourself deeply and go deeply within first and make sure it's really you. Make sure it's really what you want and not someone else's expectations. Be that society or your family or friends or the past teachings that might not be so true to you as you may have never realized until you really start to thinking and looking at the inner mirror of contemplation and reflection. So that today, my friends, is a little bit about magic and a little bit of the teachings I know from Figu and even Marissa Peer and my own experiences. And Dynamo Stadium is right across the street. I'll try to post Robbie's song that I'm thinking about, find that lyric, because be careful about your expectations and your own self-limitations and your own self-talk. And with Marissa Peer, I agree on those points. The same with Figu.